Season's greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining us to learn how to make some beautiful and unique holiday decorations. The Halton Hills Public Library is pleased to welcome back Lil from the Georgetown Horticultural Society to show us how to make 3 different elaborate holiday decor pieces that are still easy to craft and use many materials that you may already have around your home.
Hi, and welcome back to part 2 of our series with the library. And today we're going to be working with some designs that are slightly more complex than we did with the quick and easies. But again, none of them are difficult and all of them are achievable by any of you at home. The first thing we're going to do today is a rectangular design. Now, this works best if you have a rectangular container. However, if you don't have one, I don't want you going out and driving yourself nuts looking for containers. What I have here is a loaf pan. And if I were actually going to use this, I'd probably spray paint it black. And in that loaf pan, I have put some oasis that I've cut down. Now, your oasis doesn't have to be this high. It only needs to be about an inch above the rim of your container. I'm not going to cut this because then I won't be able to use this for something else. When you have your oasis in your container, bevel the edges. That makes it easier if you're inserting plant material because you can't really insert into a corner. You soak your oasis, you drop it in a pail of water, you let it sink and you take it out. You don't let it sit there for an hour. You can oversoak this stuff. So where do you get your oasis? Well, you can get it from your local florist. You can go in and ask to buy a brick or 2 and they're not terribly expensive. Or you can go to a good craft store like Michael's. And for these designs, make sure that you use Oasis, which is for wet, as opposed to Sahara, which is for dry. The Sahara will not absorb water, and in these designs, you want a water source for your plant material. So I have prepped. This is just a simple container. What's in here? There's some pine, there's some cedar that we collected, so that didn't cost us anything. This is euonymus from my neighbor's garden that I cut with her permission because she tells me I can. There is boxwood in here, which I have growing in a container in my garden. There's hellebore leaves in here too. And the hellebore leaves are there to give contrast of shape and texture. So you can see that this has gotten to be quite full. The other thing that you can get, and again, this is something you could get from your local florist, ask them to buy you a bunch of Gaelic leaves the next time they're at their supplier. And Gaelic leaves, again, have a different form. And just add another dimension. Now, when you are doing anything like this, you do not want any of your mechanics to show. Your mechanics in this case are your oasis. Notice that things come down over the edge so that it's not just a divided design. You don't want things to be divided, you want things to be a whole pleasing unit. So now that I've done this, what can I do with it? Well, there are several things. I can use candles. If you're going to use candles in the design, look how carefully I kept things wrapped. These are just popsicle sticks from the dollar store, and I've wrapped them around the base. And the reason I do that is this goes into the oasis and holds it firmly, whereas if you try to shove the whole candle in, then things begin to wiggle around. So and this one I haven't done because I need this candle for something else, but I'm going to do this anyway. You get the idea. Now, this isn't quite where I want it to be, so we're going to be doing a lot of turning. So I have some carnations. See already the difference? And don't place them in a regimented manner, kind of like soldiers. You want things to flow naturally. So that's quite pretty with the red in there. But you know, you need some relief. So for relief, we have got Lysianthus. Lysianthus look terribly delicate, but in actual fact, they are quite hardy, and they will last you for a long time, as will your carnations. And if you keep your oasis moist, this arrangement will last for quite a while. You need to spray the greens every once in a while to allow them to absorb water. Now, you can keep adding until you have as many in there as you might like. I'm going to throw that out because that's a great bud. So, there is one design almost done. The candles work quite nicely, but I wanted a slightly different look. I have a tendency to like things that have a little bit of an edge. So, instead of the candles, oops, I just pulled it right off. Instead of the candles, you know how in the summertime there's all these things for your outdoor gardens? Well, these are spikes. There's a little hole here so you can hang it on the wall, and you put a taper or some sort of a candle up there for your garden. Well, look at the look. Isn't that quite different from the candles? It takes it slightly out of the traditional without being over the top. So this design works really well, whichever way you choose to do it. It's fun to do, doesn't take a lot of material, and don't be afraid to cut up your plant material when you're working with your greenery and stuff, you know, you don't want to work with this. You want to cut it here or cut it here. So make it do what you want it to do. Don't be forced to do what it thinks it might want to do. So there is one design. So number 2. This one is for the handy woman. And we are going to do things. This is just a piece of wood that I have drilled some holes into. And this is not the one we're going to use, but this is the one I brought to show you. So it's, you know, every woman should have her own power tools. So what have I done? I have just a skewer. I've glued a test tube. I went to Walmart, I bought some wool. Just going to put a dab of wool, literally just a tiny dab. And then you just wind. Now, this would go much faster if I had thicker wool, but they didn't have any thicker wool when I was at the store. Now, so here we have a bunch. Bunch is a nice technical term, isn't it? This is a technique I learned from my designer in New Zealand. And it's fun. It's fun. Now I have here some grapevine. And the grapevine was a little bit brittle. So I soaked it in warm water. And I've left the little tendrils on because I think the little tendrils, on the grapevine give it additional character. And if it breaks, you just move it. None of this is life and death. So if things don't go your way, just deal with it. Now, you can add lots more grapevine, but this gives you what you're looking for. Then I would start to add and because these things are all at different attitudes, you can weave them in. Things are quite flexible. So keep adding and make sure that you cover your base nicely. Now, in this particular case, I did not paint the base. You can paint the base any color that you want and make it work with your decor, or you can leave it as raw wood. There is more of a feeling of people wanting the look of raw wood to start. So what have I got so far? Well, I've got a bunch of tubes that are doing nothing. And I would fill each tube about 3/4 full with water. And then you can start to add things like gypsophila or gypsophilia, depending on where you come from. So that's begun to lighten, isn't it? Now, look at these beautiful orchids. If you happen to buy a spray of orchids, they've got these little tubes on the bottom, so save them. Always save your tubes, because you just never know. When you buy orchids, these buds will never open. So look for orchids that have the most open buds that you can find. And you can just simply put a single flower in a test tube as well. Orchids are another plant or a flower that look delicate as can be, but they are tough. They are really, really tough. So if you give them some water and basically just give them water, they will give you a lot of bang for your buck. You can keep adding. In the interest of time, I'm not going to carry on because you don't need to watch me just keep adding things. But you can make this quite long, should you choose, and it could be very dramatic. This just happened to be a piece of wood that I had. Next, bought a wreath. Well, that's pretty, but you know, what are you going to do with the wreath? So you kind of fluff it up a little bit. And then remember I was talking about saline test tubes. So you have a test tube with some water in it. You put your carnation in and tuck it. Tuck it in to start giving this some color. What do you do if you don't have test tubes? Because not everybody does. So here are little cubes that I've made with Oasis. You wet them, and then very carefully, I did a larger one so that you could see. You wrap it in saran as if you were wrapping a sandwich. And you use that as your water source. And if you tuck, you can't see. And by wrapping it in saran, it does two things. It keeps the moisture in, and it keeps it from dribbling all over your table or whatever else you happen to be putting it on. You can add pine cones to this. You can, I don't want that there. You can add all sorts of things. There's no limit to your imagination. And there is not necessarily a right and a wrong. One year, perhaps, at the library will do a class on actually making a wreath. They can be fun. I'm going to add some gypsophila. To brighten things up. I can add some lysianthus. You never throw out your greenery until you know you're absolutely, or any of your plant material actually, until you're absolutely positive that you finished with it, because, you know, look how pretty just the buds are. Over the years, I've managed to collect all sorts of weird and wonderful tubes. So that's more interesting than it was when we started. But it's nowhere near done. So what have we got next? Better? What else can we do? Say you don't happen to have a container that has a space for a candle in it. You can, and it happens to be a flat base. If you wanted to use a candle, use some candle wax and kind of secure it to the bottom. But it's cranberry time. Don't use frozen cranberries, use fresh cranberries. If you had a container and filled it to here with water, you could even do it with the candle. How's that for a festive table? Thanks again to the library. We hope you've had a good time. Bye-bye and happy seasons. Bye-bye.